video, what we're going to talk about is posture. In today's presentation, I want to talk about posture. Now, posture is one of those things that when people think about posture, they're really thinking about the aesthetic value of posture. So if someone's standing up really straight versus someone who's hunched over, that's the first thing people really think about when it comes to posture. Just, am I standing up taller? But it goes much deeper than that. So what we want to take a look at is posture from the perspective of how we're moving. Do we have any joint pain that's being affected by suboptimal posture? And also, is it affecting my balance? So as a person gets older, what you'll find is on a side profile is people will start to get a little bit more rounded in their shoulders, their chin starts to jut forward. And that's the number one thing we see as people age, where everybody's going into flexion, right? So gravity never sleeps. So we're constantly fighting against posture. And most people, again, will find themselves being hunched over. Well, what happens is then that changes your center of gravity, and it's much easier to fall. But another thing, too, is it really affects how a person moves. So as we go through this, I want you to really pay attention to some of these details so you can start taking a look at posture from a personal perspective and what you can do to maybe not only look better, feel better, but ultimately move better. So let's get into the presentation. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through kind of the different components of posture. So if we think about, if someone says, I got to look at my posture, I got to work on my posture, they're going to pull their shoulders back. They're going to try and stand a little bit taller. But what we want to really understand is the ongoing relationship of your body segments and how your bones stack on each other. And your skeletal framework is under the control of your musculature and your nervous system. So if the muscles get shorter or tighter and the nervous system adapts to that, that moves your skeletal framework out of ideal alignment. And again, we talked about gravity never sleeps. So we're constantly fighting it. So muscles are going to balance the tension. So under stress, certain muscles are going to get shorter and tighter. And then other muscles are going to get longer and weaker. And so then the skeletal framework is then going to be altered because certain muscles are pulling you out of alignment because of how tight they are. And the muscles that should be balancing those muscles that should be stronger to place you in that good alignment, they start to weaken or become inhibited. And so we want to start taking a look at these muscle imbalances that we may have in our body. So let's go through the three core jobs of posture. So good posture isn't, again, just a cosmetic issue. It's a window in how well the body manages the three primary tasks. So if you take a look at the first one is respiration, breathing fully while maintaining core stability. Now, I've actually evaluated hundreds and hundreds of people, and I can say without reservation that 99.9% of the people out there today are not breathing optimally. And the only people that are generally breathing optimally have actually gone through extensive breath work, because there's posture affects things, stress affects how you're breathing. And then another thing too is when a person develops patterns over a long period of time, it becomes kind of your go-to. So if a person is breathing really shallow and vertically, then your nervous system eventually adapts to that. And then that becomes your go-to instead of breathing through your diaphragm fully and controlled. So breathing is a big thing. And if your posture is not optimal, that will really affect your breathing. And then if you're breathing consistently more vertically, it's going to make you round your shoulders. It's going to cause you to round the shoulders and jut your neck out. And the support, holding your body against gravity. So again, your body's getting pulled forward like this, and ideally these muscles should be on the front side should be looser, and then the muscles on the back side should be engaged or stronger. So for most people, they're too tight on the front side, and then they're too weak on the back side. So it doesn't matter if it's through your chest and your upper back musculature then gets weak, or if your hips are too tight, and then that causes weakness in your gluteal muscles, then that's going to lead to low back problems, hip problems, and actually even knee problems. So posture, will really affect a lot of your joints as well. And then movement, transitioning smoothly and safely between positions. That's what we want to really make sure we're doing, is we're moving smoothly. So if we're moving smoothly, that means we don't have restrictions. And if we have good posture, that will prevent us from having a lot of those tissue restrictions. So as muscles get shorter and tighter, then we lack the ability to move freely. Now, let's go through optimal versus suboptimal posture. So you can see on the left side, optimal organization or optimal posture, the energy cost is low. Tissue rest and minimal unnecessary strain. So that's ideally what we want. We want low energy costs, not high energy costs when it comes to our posture. So if we come over to suboptimal organization, we have high energy costs. It requires chronic muscle tension. So if we think of someone who's got more rounded shoulders and their neck is jutting out, you have all this tension in the neck, in the jaw, in the shoulders. So energy cost is a big one. Next, it's load sharing. So are the muscles evenly distributed? Are they distributing the force around that joint? So if the muscles are balanced, then that joint can handle the force. And if it's not, then that force will go in the joint. That's generally how people end up with joint problems. So you can see suboptimal organization overloads specific vulnerable tissues. So your hips can be too tight, your chest can be too tight, this upper neck musculature can get too tight. And then remember, the muscles on the backside then generally become inhibited or get weaker. So if we look at adaptability, responsive, balanced, we're going to move freely. And if we have suboptimal posture, we're going to be stiffer, guarded, and highly unstable. And then when we get into breathing, when we have ideal posture, we're going to breathe more effectively. We're going to have more horizontal expansion through the diaphragm, and we're not going to have that shallow, vertical chest breathing. And when we get vertical and we breathe through our chest and we excessively work this neck musculature, it can lead to a whole host of neck problems, jaw problems, shoulder problems, chronic headaches. These are all things that happen when we start to develop these faulty patterns with our breathing. So these are things that are going to have a huge impact of breath and posture. So posture and breathing are really these dance partners, and poor posture physically locks the rib cage down. So we can't get this nice horizontal expansion through the rib cage. And if we can't breathe horizontally through the rib cage, again, then we go vertical. And when we're breathing shorter and more shallow and we're going vertically, then we upregulate our sympathetic nervous system. So we get locked into this fight or flight. And that's where people will develop more anxiety or a decrease in bandwidth for really handling stress loads. So breathing is such a critical component of your health. So if we look here at the slide, poor breathing mechanics, flared collapse, stiff ribs, that is physically going to alter your posture. So we have to make sure we have optimal breathing because that can create all these postural issues. And on the reverse side of things, if we have poor posture, that can affect how we breathe. So we also need to have a balance between oxygen and carbon dioxide in our bloodstream. And if we don't have that balance, typically what will happen is people become overbreathers. So instead of this long sustained exhale, what happens is they'll be taking in more oxygen, but not blowing off their carbon dioxide. And so then your brain becomes more sensitive to the carbon dioxide, and it leads to this perpetual cycle of overbreathing. And when we overbreathe like that, it increases not only respiration, but it will actually create more of that upregulated sympathetic nervous system state where you're locked into more fight or flight. You're going to be having a more narrow capacity for dealing with stress. Now, also, when we're not breathing properly and our posture is altered, that decreases our core muscles' ability to stabilize our spine. So not only are we vulnerable to low back pain, but then everything comes upstream and we get all this tension in the neck. And that's how we get stiff neck, sore neck, our shoulders are stiff. So that can lead to the neck, jaw, and shoulder problems that I talked about. Okay, so another thing is this ripple effect, circulation and fluid. Now, many times I talk about if we want to keep health really simple, it boils down to balance and flow. Balance and flow. So if we have a blockage of any kind, and no conventional doctor is going to ever refute that, no alternative practitioner is ever going to refute, if there's a blockage of any kind in the body, bad things are going to happen. So that's blood flow, nerve flow, lymph flow. We always want to make sure we have flow. And if we have poor posture, chronically compressed body tissues impair the efficient movement of all those fluids. And so that can create stagnation. And we want to make sure that we optimize posture so that improves the dynamics of all the fluids in the body. Then balance and gait. So misalignment shifts the center of mass over your base of support. And I talked about that earlier. So as a person gets older and they start to get into that forward position, then when your center of gravity changes, then you're going to have poorer balance. So your walking efficiency is also a challenge. And then your foot mechanics are also going to change. So lots of different overuse injuries, and then of course an increase in fall risk. So that's another thing we really want to pay attention to is balance and how we're walking. Anything we're doing with our gait, walking or jogging, will be altered by our posture. So we talked about pain patterns, and that's, again, posture alone doesn't necessarily equal pain, but it's definitely going to be a multiplier. Sometimes I'll see people with really poor posture, and they'll be next to someone with posture not quite as bad as theirs. And the one with the worst posture might not even be having any issues, where the person that has a little bit better posture, maybe they've got neck problems, jaw problems. But that's the one thing we have to understand about the body. The body does not work in isolation. The body is an integrated system. So there's many times other factors or other variables that go into why that person's having problems. But you're always going to be more vulnerable to repetitive strain or joint issues with suboptimal posture. So just another reason to really work on your posture. So it's not a strategy, not a pose. It's a strategy, not a pose. Posture is a body's structural and neurological expression of how it manages gravity, breath, and movement. So again, it's not just looking good. It's how your body is organized to deal with the stressors of life. Stacking is greater than straining. So optimal organization allows tissues to rest. Efficient alignment lowers the energy cost and prevents uneven joint wear and enables deep, stable breathing. So breathing is obviously the number one thing we do. I've talked about breathing 1,000 times, but the average person is breathing 20 to 25,000 times a day. So that gives you an opportunity to really optimize your health or detract from it. So just another reason why we have to pay attention to our posture. And then if we want ideal motion, and motion is lotion to the joints. So we have to make sure we're moving and we're moving freely. So the healthiest posture is an adaptable, well-coordinated system, and it's never rigid stillness. So the less rigidity we have in our body, of course, the better it is. We want that freedom of movement, and we want to be able to move not freely, but with ease. So if you have any kind of restriction, remember the energy requirements are significantly greater. So that's what I want you to understand is posture is so much more than, just looking better. Posture is really going to affect so many, and actually it affects organs, glands, and other systems. Just remember this, no part of the body works in isolation. We are an integrated system. So that is your presentation for the day. Posture, it's a lot more than just looking good. It's about feeling good. It's about moving freely, moving pain-free, and make sure you start evaluating how you're moving, how you're standing, what you look like in just a static posture, because your static posture is going to affect your dynamic posture. So if you start, in an aberrant position where you've got poor posture, you're not going to move with ideal posture. So it just controls so much of our lives, and it's such a critical piece to feeling your very best, to being as healthy as you can. So if you need any help with your posture, you need any help with your breathing, make sure you reach out. We love to work with you on identifying what some of the challenges or the imbalances you might have, how we can correct those very simply with a good sound strategy. So that is all for now. Until I see you next time, go out and make it a great day. You certainly do deserve it. Bye for now.